What we're going to discuss next is, unemployment or our lack of unemployment. Sean, extremely belittling idea re Shortland Street. Let all experienced New Zealand medical staff go back to work. All right, you're talking about the mandates there, and I understand. I wonder if they dealt with the issues of mandates on Shortland Street, because Shortland Street should be called Wokeland Street, apparently. Shortland Street's always trying to get into social issues instead of just being even an average soap opera. That's the problem with it. It's made by lovies, Shortland Street. What we're going to text now, we're going to talk unemployment. And I would have thought, here's me, just guy in the street, person in the street, and you would think that low unemployment is good for a country, and if everyone had a job, the country would be tickety-boo, everything would be right, and we wouldn't be paying people to do nothing through our social welfare system. But the truth is that it doesn't quite work like that, and National Party MP Louise Upston is joining us to explain why. Louise, welcome to the platform. Nice to have you with us.
Great to be here, Sean. How are you?
Good, thank you. Now, I just presumed if unemployment was low, then we wouldn't be paying many people the unemployment benefit. If there was lots of employment, there's less social welfare and state subsidies going out and fewer people are on benefits. That's how it works, isn't it?
Well, that's what you would think, but unfortunately what we've seen under Labor is an absolute explosion of benefit dependency. So we've got more people on the Jobseeker benefit and they're staying there for longer. At the very same time, there are businesses everywhere desperate for staff. So no, it doesn't line up, and it should.
Well, how can we say unemployment's down if more people are on the unemployment benefit?
Yeah, so the reality is if you look at the statistics that come out of stats, they'll come out today, which measure the unemployment rate. That is a snapshot in time. The number of people who are receiving the Jobseeker benefit is the more accurate measure, in my view, of what's happening, because that's the number of New Zealanders, 170,000, that taxpayers are funding who are not in employment and receiving a benefit for not being able to cover their own costs.
Okay. Are you suggesting then that the unemployment as generally accepted by New Zealanders at the moment is a myth or a statistical aberration?
Well, it's a statistic that's used on a regular basis, but I'm not sure that Labor can be crowing about success in unemployment. At the same time, they're seeing a massive explosion in the number of people on the Jobseeker benefit, which is the unemployment benefit. You know, for those who've been on Jobseeker benefit for 2 to 3 years, that's an over 100% increase. And so that's really what the concern is. When there are jobs out there, businesses crying out for staff, Labor continues to oversee a benefit dependency explosion, and they don't seem to be tackling it in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, looking at the figures, and I believe these are the figures that are coming out today, I think the largest increase is in people on Jobseeker for 2 to 3 years, and that's like quite chronic in terms of unemployment. In September of 2017, it was 11,439. In March of this year, 24,243. That's 112% increase in 5 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. So the government could say, you know, COVID's been a contributor. It may well have been at the start, but right now, any street in New Zealand, you just about go past any business and they're asking for staff. And they're not asking for skilled staff. There's people like Dairy NZ who are heavily advertising to get people into primary industries, and they will fully train them up. And there are examples like this all over New Zealand. So it's an absolute crime, in my view, when businesses are desperate for staff to have the number of people on the Jobseeker benefit and who've been stuck there for longer that we're witnessing now.
Okay,
Labor aren't
and you know the question that's got to come, is that because those people don't want to work, or we make it too easy for them not to work? How do we move them off there?
Well, I think there's a combination of factors, and the reality is when there are jobs out there, there is a higher responsibility for work and income to connect those people who are receiving a benefit onto work. And absolutely, if job seekers aren't fulfilling their responsibilities, there should be consequences. We refer to them as sanctions, but they're pretty common sense. Are you applying for jobs? Do you have a job, a current CV? Have you picked up a job if that was accepted? Have you gone on the relevant training programs? And at the same time, we've seen the job seeker rate absolutely explode. We've seen a significant and ongoing decline ever since Labor came in of the sanctions that are applied. So to me, not too much of a mystery about what's going on.
Okay, so Louise, let's not beat around the bush. You're saying Labor is soft on deadbeats who don't want to get off the dole and get the job, take the jobs that are available.
Well, those are your words, Sean. What I would say is
that's
Labor
exactly
is squandering...
the meaning of what you've just been saying. Let's not dress this up.
Well, here's the reality. There are jobs available, and there are far too many people on the job seeker benefit who could take up some of those roles. And so, yes, you have to ask the question, why not? And one of the obvious answers is that work and income aren't doing their jobs to support people into employment and then to ensure there are consequences for those who don't.
Okay, so how would a national government do things differently?
Well, the first thing is you've actually got to focus on those who've been unemployed long term, not just those who are on and off the benefit in the short cycle. You'll hear more about our policies over the coming weeks and months. But it's about targeted interventions, intensively working with people to support them into a job and then keep them there. And making sure that there are obligations, and when those obligations aren't met, there's a consequence. It's called, practical reality. And we're desperate to make sure that we're connecting people to those jobs. I'm doing a nationwide workshop. I've had one already, Napier next week, called Into Work Workshops. That's directly connecting people who are looking for workers with those who are out of work in community, because that's where we solve the answers. It's not solved in Wellington, it's solved in the community where the employers have got the jobs and those working with job seekers can connect them with that opportunity. So I'm doing a series of 14 around New Zealand, practical, sensible, getting people into work.
All right. What would be your goal numbers-wise? 170,000 unemployed at the moment. I note 55,000 of those people have been unemployed for 3 years or more. Man, that's a difficult number to move or to change, I would suggest. So what would... And
it's not impossible.
Okay. In your first 100 days...
It's not impossible.
What would you reduce that 170,000 people on Jobseeker by?
Well, I think the first 100 days would be challenging, but I would be ensuring that work and income are working person by person to reduce that number. We would set a target when we come into government, and we will measure it, and we will hold MSD accountable for those results. That's one of the clear differences from 5 years ago. Labor don't care about the number on benefit. They don't count it. They don't measure it. They don't have any focus on supporting people off welfare into work. And that is an absolutely cruel way to treat people. National doesn't believe it's kind to leave people stuck on benefit. We want to support them so that they can get into work and get off and running with their lives.
So fundamentally, you'd make it harder to get a job seeker benefit and harder to keep one if you weren't genuinely seeking a job.
And we'd put more effort into helping people to remove the actual barriers they have to work. So some people we fully accept have a number of barriers to work. If you don't address those barriers, it's harder for a person to get into work. And that very person that's been out of a job for 2 years, it'll be difficult. It'll be difficult to connect them to a job and get them to stay there. But we will deal with the practical barriers that individual faces. We won't just leave them on a benefit to rot, which is what is happening at the moment.
You ever been unemployed yourself, Louise?
I've been on the DPB. I know what it's like to rely on the state for an income, and it's not much fun. And it's really bloody hard to get off it. And that's why I'm really, really positive about the opportunity of supporting people off welfare into work. I've been there and done it. It is possible. And for every New Zealander that is in that position now, we owe it to them to connect them to the opportunities that exist right now. There is no better time when businesses are desperate for workers to connect them to jobs.
Yeah. You know, of course, though, you're going to be accused of being mean and beneficiary bashing and elitist and right wing, aren't you?
But the reality is, for people who are on benefit, on the Jobseeker benefit, they will have far more opportunities and they will be able to have a much greater life if they're in work. And what we also know, and this is the bit that deeply concerns me, we know the life outcomes of children raised in benefit-dependent homes are far worse than those who aren't. Whether you look at education outcomes, whether you look at health outcomes, or whether you look at economic outcomes. So we actually have to break the cycle of welfare dependency, because not only is it a massive economic cost, it is a huge social cost. And I'm just unwilling to sit back and watch that happen. So it's a firm but fair approach, and I will not resile from that, because that is what helps people up and allows them to live a great life and live a life where they can fulfil their own potential and not be stuck on a benefit.
Employers could also just pay more money to people to make having a job way better financially than it is sitting on the benefit.
I don't think that the wages issue is the problem right now, when you've got horticulture picking jobs and packhouse jobs going for sort of $27, $28 an hour. Some of them can get up to $40 an hour. Just about every industry is now paying significantly more than they were a couple of years ago, because they're desperate to get staff. So I don't think wages is the issue. If you look at a single unemployment rate and a full-time minimum wage job, it's 3 times as much if you're in work. 3 times as much.
While we've got you there, Louise Upston, are you a Shortland Street fan?
Not anymore. Don't have time to watch that now.
All right. Do you think it's a good way to recruit nurses?
I think it's an outrageous way to recruit nurses. I mean, we've needed nurses for quite some time. I think the simple way is to change the residency rules so we can get them in the same way as doctors. And we need to do it for midwives as well. There's a desperate shortage out there, and that is wreaking real harm on our families and communities. And so, no, I'm not sure that Shortland Street's the answer.
Louise Upston, I thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. National MP Louise Upston there, and interesting, isn't it? Super low unemployment, but huge numbers of people on the Jobseeker benefit. Do you agree with Louise Upston's approach? And that is what we should put some money in people, getting people off those benefits and picking up the jobs that are available, because there is a shortage of workers. And how can you have a shortage of workers and a growth in the number of people pulling your taxpayers' dollars for doing nothing? And I think she expressed the imbalance on those issues and those figures actually pretty well.